Welcome to KBTime. I'm your host, Kabir. Thanks for tuning in for this edition where we're going to talk about the blizzard of '78. It was one of the most severe blizzards to be named that, and there was record low barometric pressure, record high snowfall, and we're going to hear about how it affected Northeast Ohio, not from a couple of weather egghead types, but from two regular folks who happen to live in town and were right outside the studio doors just before we started taping, and I said, can you please be on the show? They said, yeah, sure. So please welcome Barb and Curt Van Blarcum. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Kabir.
Now, who's who? No, I'm kidding. So you two lived through the blizzard of 1978. January 26th, I think they said, is when it...
And 77,
when it
too.
hit. And 77. So there was a year-long blizzard, and you lived through the whole thing. And for both of them, were you, I mean, you were based in this area, but tell me roughly, we'll start with you. You were a student at Kent for both of them, or where were you?
No, I was Hudson High School in 77.
Okay.
And then 78, I was living in the dorms at Kent State.
And how did that go with the blizzard and road crews trying to extricate people?
Well, living in the dorm was kind of cozy and fine because I didn't have a car, and I had just bought some cross-country skis. And so school got canceled, I think 5 days or so.
Really?
Yeah. Maybe that's the total for the whole season, but at least that week we had several days of cancellation. So, you know, the dorm had food and I had my skis, and so there wasn't a whole lot of disruption other than time off for me.
Now, which building were you in?
I was in small group housing,
Okay.
which is the dorms that have since been destroyed, except for one of them, but it was the Humphrey Hall I was in.
So you weren't up several stories?
No,
like,
actually I was sub-level, so my window actually was filling.
Was it filled?
Yeah.
Did anyone open the window and try to chisel a tunnel to go upwards or anything?
No.
No? people, I guess, didn't think about that sort of stuff. They
Well,
just hung out.
it was a tall window, so I could see out and everything, but it was filling.
Were you at all concerned? I mean, this was your first year away at school.
No, not really, just because, yeah, I knew they would get the plows out and, you know, we'd all be rolling again. But it was, you know, I skied downtown, and, you know, it was very noticeable that things kind of came to a halt, and the winds were pretty ferocious. So drifting was a huge problem.
Right, right. They said a lot of the snowfall, they don't even know exactly how much there was because of all the winds blowing things around to measure it. And the week leading up to that was pretty bad snow-wise too already.
I think so,
right?
yeah. So it was kind of just, how much more can we take? You know, it was more and more and more.
Now, if you had food and your friends, and I imagine a television, radio, hi-fi, whatever, in the dorm, what were you skiing downtown to get?
I was just using my skis mostly,
Oh, okay.
but I don't know if I went and got groceries or anything, but you know, I think our area got it better. I know I was talking to someone who was in college in Providence, Rhode Island, and she said that the East Coast got ice first, so it was really halted that way, and they're not as prepared for it, so it really. You know, she used her cross-country skis to deliver supplies to people and things.
Pretty good.
So.
Well, and compared to 77, what are your memories?
77, I just remember the ski club was delighted, and you know, the Boston Mills was delighted too.
Sure, of course, of course. And in Kent back then was more of a, not even college town, just like a small town.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it felt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, were any places open? Was the Wendy's built yet? Because I know that was a source of controversy. So the Wendy's didn't even exist
I don't know.
yet.
I don't know.
Heartbeat Records?
It's not a place I've often gone to.
Oh, come on. All I find in your trash is Wendy's wrappers.
Right.
Heartbeat Records, did they close that down?
I don't know. I didn't go shopping from what I recall. I was a freshman in college. I didn't have money to go buy records in a snowstorm.
True point. You were a little bit older, though.
I was older.
Yeah. You didn't know each other then?
Not.
You hadn't
we met
yet.
the following spring.
Right.
Oh.
79.
Or 78. I'll figure it out.
What? All right.
Environmental geology class.
Right.
Really?
I was a junior. Yep.
Yeah.
I always thought that you two met, for some reason I had this like grand vision that you met away from Kent State, but
Nope.
no, all
Glenn
right.
Frank, environmental geology course.
Oh, pretty good. So when you sat down next to her or whatever, did you immediately start talking about the blizzard?
No.
No?
Darn.
Well, that would have been a good story.
I didn't really have a dorm experience during the blizzard. I had a kind of an unconventional way of being at Kent State.
Yeah.
I lived at a horse farm on the outskirts of town. And I had an older sister who was already there because she was always interested in horses. So she said, you should talk to Larry about moving out there. He needs another hired hand. So I went out there and I looked, and he had an old mobile home. And the mobile home probably should have never been north of the Mason-Dixon line. I didn't know that when I first moved into it because it was fall.
Right.
Well,
was it heat or delete, you mean, or what?
The heat situation was pretty absent in the first winter, 77, and the winter of 78. I had a 48 Chevrolet pickup truck.
Nice.
And it was still a 6-volt truck. And it had some problems with the first winter, and it really got worse the second winter, the winter of 78. And I remember we had a little bit of a warm thaw before the blizzard came, and I remember washing the salt off my truck, which I religiously do anyway, and I came back that night, and I'd gone to bed because I had to feed the horses. That was part of my routine, was to feed horses and clean stalls on the weekends. And that night that I had gone to bed, I knew that the winds were starting to howl, and it felt like like sardines that are in a vacuum can. How they, all the air is sucked out. Well, I could feel this happening with this old mobile home that I lived in. It felt like the walls were being convexed
from the pressure.
From the pressure, and I didn't realize, that we were in for the storm of the century, and. So that next morning, I got up bright and early to feed horses and give them their water, and I knew that it was just rock'em sock'em stuff. And going out into the back pastures where we had horses to feed as well, it was just like survival, man, just to be able to stay on the ground because of the wind. And it's a wide open area. This is off of Newcomer Road, and Johnson Road is kind of the road that goes down to this valley, and the wind would just come through there. It was just like being in the Great Plains. There was just nothing there to stop the wind.
And being in the, looking back, being in that mobile home with the drop in pressure and the temperatures, that could have been very unsafe. Could it not have? You were essentially sleeping outdoors.
Yeah, mobile home parks and these units in general, unless they're really, strapped to the earth, are vulnerable, and especially in tornadoes and things like that. Those parks are typically really disassembled, and for this mobile home, it was probably from the late 50s. It was right, broadside to this prevailing wind, this blizzard force wind, and I remember walking out into the pasture, and there were some really large snowbanks, and I would just crawl back underneath there, and it was just watching, almost like in slow motion, this accumulation of snow build up these tall drifts that were taking place. And we had a large tractor and a hay wagon, and so for the horses that were out in the back pasture, they were fed a bale of hay per day. That's a lot of forage to go through, but the metabolic necessity of that horse required that kind of forage. So it was survival mode. There was a few cold days during that blitz where my truck wouldn't start, and that was the next challenge after dealing with the horses. How do I get to school?
Well, now school closed for a couple days, she said, so that must have helped.
Yes.
But you still had to go and probably get supplies and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah. Just getting groceries and things like that.
What'd you do?
And I think actually that was the first year that Kent had gone from quarters to semesters, because I think that they had looked at their energy, their energy audit had suggested that they shut things down for a longer span during the worst part of the winter.
Right.
So Kent's been on semesters ever since.
Right. And were you able to get to school if the truck started?
Oh, I had to walk to classes sometimes from Larry's, and that's literally a few miles out.
Wow.
And I would just try to network with people and finally, get a ride there. I think that year a friend of mine who was also in the conservation program, he had a little Chevrolet Vega. It was in really bad condition, but I knew that it was better than trying to start a 6-volt truck from 1948. So I bought this Vega from him, and it was like, finally, I have this predictability factor of getting to school on time.
Yeah.
And one night, I thought, this Vega's treated me well. I'm gonna give it a little bath and get the salts removed. So near the old Kent State or the Kent Police Station, there used to be a spray wash. So I spray washed the car, and I came out, and I was just sitting there waiting for the light to turn green. Mind you, this is 59 and 43, a very busy intersection. And I was about ready to accelerate. I did so, and all of a sudden I'm like sitting back like this in my seat as something drastically just happened. And I tried opening up the door because the car's at this weird angle, and the axle, because it had so much rust, it fell out from underneath the car.
Wow.
And it's in the intersection, that busy intersection.
Oh no.
So before cell phones, my response was to walk across the street to the police station, describe to them what had happened, and they said, call Boyle's junkyard.
Oh no.
I called the junkyard, and I told them the situation. They said, well, take the plate off the car, take your books and your stuff, and we'll just haul it out.
And what did they give you? Did they give you something for it?
No, I didn't want anything for it. I just wanted to be done with it.
Oh, wow. And a Vega in 1979 wouldn't have been that old.
No.
5 years tops, because the Vegas came out in 73,
but they were vulnerable to salt, like a lot of other cars have been.
So basically, salt was holding your car together, is what you're saying.
The spray wash unglued
The spray wash unglued the car.
Well, living at Larry Stables, I learned a trick of baling twine and duct tape.
Okay. And that kept it together.
Right.
So you should have brought a Beetle. You know this, right?
Right. Oh, yes.
Yeah. You got that later.
Yes.
You learned that later.
Learned that.
Actually, I drove that 48 after I graduated from Kent. I did pipeline leakage detection, so I had this contract all over the East Coast. I didn't really like working in the East Coast. I worked in the Midwest, and then from there I was transferred to Oregon. And my next contract was in California, so I left my 48 Chevrolet in Oregon, and that's where I bought my first Beetle.
Oh, okay, very cool. What year?
71.
Okay, so it was 12 volt by then.
Yes.
That was, you learned. You jumped up.
It still had a flat windshield.
Still had the flat windshield. That was the last year for that.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, that's what I had.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, you know this. What am I saying? So, speaking of which, by the way, if there's ever another blizzard of that catastrophicness, the Volkswagen Beetles are excellent, as you know, in the snow.
A studded snow tire with a Volkswagen engine in the rear is hard to beat.
Yeah.
Don't they swim too?
They can swim. If you plug up the little holes at the bottom, you can get them to swim a good distance. Speaking of which, you remember Gerbs. Gerbs is obsessed with me not wearing pants and decided to show everyone that I'm not wearing said pants. But anyhow, next time I'll learn, and I'll wear pants and shoes. Because as you know, even if there was a blizzard of 78 right now, I would be outside in shorts and sandals. So how did you guys bundle up when you were in the blizzard back then? Just regular?
Lots of layers.
Special?
I'm a scarf person, so I just leave a little bit of my eyes out. So.
Extra eyeshadow though? Even
Tons
to protect?
of it, yes.
Okay, so that helps.
I cake it on.
That's what I do. What about you?
Well, I think I had layers and layers, but I know when I was in the mobile home, the night of the blizzard, and for a good part of that entire winter, I had been sleeping in a down-filled sleeping bag.
Oh, that's good.
Because I had been planning on doing a backpacking trip in Alaska with a buddy of mine.
Sure.
And so it was always rough to get out of that nice warm bag.
I bet.
Because when I would look out onto the floor, I had these old linoleum floor tiles, and I would see ice crystals.
Yeah.
That's how cold this mobile home was.
Wow.
That's what I say. It should have been never north of the Mason-Dixon line.
Wasn't ready for it.
It had a Coleman oil furnace that I think probably had about a 20% or less efficiency rating.
Yeah.
So
and super safe, of course.
Oh yeah. It was. I think it was the Gordon Lightfoot music that kept me going through that winter. And
Summertime Dream. Did you put that on? Just
over and over.
It wasn't Winter's Trilogy.
No, it wasn't. You don't want that, or the Edmund Fitzgerald. Wow. And then being in there, I thought also at one point you lived in a manger at this horse farm. where you burrowed back between bales of hay?
Oh yeah.
And had a little
Well,
area?
there actually was a German pointer and a beagle, and they lived in the one barn where we kept the hay.
Oh, wow.
And the dogs they created these little burrows, like an Eskimo in an igloo type of thing. And you know, a straw bale or a hay bale, either one, are remarkably thermal, and so they really had creature comfort back in there.
Pretty good. You didn't bring them in with you. You know, like 3 Dog Night for warmth. That whole thing.
Would I have been the third dog then?
Well, I don't know, but well, you know the whole story about 3 Dog Night.
No.
Tell us.
Well,
Tell us.
I expected everyone would know this, especially Meg. Meg was telling me this before the show, so I don't know if it's true. But in Alaska, right, they take dogs to bed, Eskimos do, when it's real cold. So the coldest nights is when you need 3 dogs. That's a 3 Dog Night. And that's how they got the name of the band, who Meg follows every summer up and down the eastern seaboard to their concerts and whatnot. Her and Grider. How's Asian Fusion doing? Is he good?
Good.
What, are you married yet?
No.
All right. So the blizzard of 78, you said there was, of course, 77, there was 79, but is that one seared into your memories, or have there been others now that you've sort of forgotten? It doesn't really
I
stand
think that
out.
one topped it.
Yeah, you think? Today, of course, people will be more prepared because we have more technology.
Well, the road crews are expected to be more prepared than they are now. I mean, we used to have snow tires, and
True.
you know, we just dealt with snow back then differently than we do now. And
Right.
the salt wasn't quite the issue it is constantly now.
That's
but,
true.
So people aren't as used to dealing with the snow. They expect the roads to be ready for them.
Seems like.
At least around here, we went up to Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, and we drove from there over to Traverse City, and it's a bit of the snow belt in that part of Michigan, way up there.
Right.
And they have 130 inches of snow. That's their winter annual average. So it's ours is pale in comparison.
True point, yeah. I think they said we got 6-7 inches, between 6 and 12 during the blizzard, and then 16 in the days leading up. So it was literally a perfect storm so that you could go skiing. Do you still ski?
I do.
Cross-country ski?
I do.
Okay. Do you come down the Brandywine into the neighborhood? You could.
I could.
Yeah. I mean, you couldn't because we don't know where you live. All right. Well, thanks for being here, both of you.
Well, thanks for having that
sharing the
recollection
memories.
of that winter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Let's hope this winter ends without anything nearly as similar.
Exactly.
That's it for this portion of KB Time, and we'll be back in a moment.
The first major blizzard of the new year. Rush hour traffic at a standstill on some of our major highways. We'll have a live report, along with a long list of cancellations. Our city cam reporter, Jeff Maynor, is out in it live on battered Interstate 77 with a live report. Jeff?
Well, you can see traffic is barely moving down there. We're looking at I-77 northbound toward the city. At the off-ramp here on Broadway, the ramp is barely moving at all. A lot of cars having trouble getting up that ramp, and the northbound traffic into the city is moving along very slowly, as you can see, but there are cars up ahead that are stalled, and people get to move a little bit and then have to stop. Now, we're going to stay right here on I-77, and I hope very soon we'll have a better picture to show you of traffic moving along here. This is Jeff Maynor, live with the city cam on the Broadway overpass on I-77.
I was in that mess coming in today, and it continues to be just awful tonight. You know, I can remember that every big snowstorm that's crippled this town since 1950. But experience sure doesn't make it any easier. A blizzard has and continues to be the big problem today. In fact, those fierce winds off the lakefront filed snow more than 2 feet deep on the inner belt curve this afternoon. A tractor trailer bogged down in deep drifts, jackknifed across the roadway, completely shutting down the southbound lanes for more than an hour. Traffic was backed up along the shoreway for miles and miles. And I know where you can find lots of frozen beef tonight. A Fazio's truck got stuck on Clark Avenue at West 53rd as it tried to rock out of the snow. Its 30,000-pound load of beef shifted, and that trailer went tumbling over onto a hardware store. At last report, the truck was still there. Also still here, the gale force winds that threatened downtown buildings all day long today. The wind blowing out a window at the East Ohio Gas Company, and as a workman tried to put his ladder up to cover it, the winds picked up a nearby barrel and a 100-pound bag of cement. They all went crashing through a second large window pane, and luckily no one was hurt. Well, the weather was just too much for Hopkins Airport crews today. Hopkins is closed until tomorrow morning. Our Bob Franken was out there in the bitter cold all day long as those decisions were being made. Bob?
Well, believe me, Tim, with all the problems they had at Hopkins the last time around, they tried very hard to stay open today. Even though some of their planes were able to get in and out for a while, more and more travelers ended up waiting. Many of them had been stuck overnight. They had been able to keep some runways open through the morning, but it was a losing battle. The bitter wind and snow reduced visibility to 0 this afternoon. Not only were the planes at a standstill, but everything was.
This is the worst blizzard I've ever seen in my experience at the airport, and we just can't function at all.
The decisions were being made in the Airport Operations Center, where they were coordinating.